don't know if anybody's been keeping an eye on what's been happening with certain segment of the Afrikaner population of South Africa. They're not safe in their own country anymore. In fact, the ruling post-apartheid regimes kind of got it in for them, as a lot of people who knew anything about tribalism and about, what was to come warned everyone about it, but they didn't want to listen because, they wanted to believe in the sort of neoliberal ideals that they held as just absolutely immutable, and come to find out they're not. But yeah, the ruling African government there in South Africa has basically said, you Afrikaner white farmers, you're all persona non grata. It's just a matter of time before we take all your land. And we like to lead chants where we think it's okay to lead these certain chants with our constituents, to say that, it's okay for us to pillage, plunder, and kill all of you, because more apartheid and more racism and more historical oppression and all this other bollocks that doesn't really have any relevancy in the modern world. A minority group in South Africa is finding themselves the targets and the victims of what can only be termed as a genocide. And the American government has said, we're not having that. You Afrikaners who know how to farm, you're skilled laborers and all, right, hop a plane, get over here to the US, and we'll resettle you and you can build your lives over here instead. And a lot of Afrikaners have said, sounds like a good deal, we'll do that. And a lot of people, very racist and very xenophobic against these Afrikaner farmers, have been moulding and seething over that. Here's a little something from podcast Lotus Eaters about white South Africans.
And they're actually turning a blind eye to really horrendous rhetoric that is genocidal in the making, but also they're turning a blind eye to the terrible practices which very often have victims, and lots of them are.
I mean, make no mistake, white farmers have been victims of violence in South Africa from the majority black population, because of the fact that they are white and because they're farmers. So don't fucking tell me that there is no such thing as racism against white people. And don't fucking tell me that there's no such thing as white genocide, because what we're seeing here in South Africa is white genocide. It's real, and it is happening. And to deny that it is happening makes you just as complicit in genocide. Because according to the standards that we in the Western world have set up, if you deny that a genocide is taking place, then that makes you just as complicit in genocide. They brought 50 white South Africans here. Leftists lost their minds. So much so there's an entire road of crosses of those who were victims of that violence, and it's a long road. It is indeed. It's happened in South Africa, and it also happened in Rhodesia too. What we now know as Zimbabwe. There's a long history of this sort of thing happening in Africa against white farmers. This is sadly nothing new. Only thing that is new here is the American government decided to finally do something about it.
Are disproportionately white. So what happened? We need to give some context about it because this is a subject that we have talked about it before. Josh has done several segments about it and has done an interview which we are going to talk about with Ernst von Zyl. Let me show it to you here. Definitely check it out. They're talking about the fate of South Africa, and you can find it on a website. Go and check it out. So this is a topic that we have spoken about before, but we need to address several people, and maybe they don't know the context. So I'm going to give you some of the context here. So South Africa is governed by the ANC party for about 30 years. There's the party of Nelson Mandela, which came with...
ANC, I believe, is short for the African National Congress, or, yeah, I think that's the long form name.
Great promises of liberation, but it looks like everything is worse. Yep. I don't think that this is...
I don't think anyone can really say that South Africa is in a better position than it was 30 years ago.
It's not particularly controversial claim.
Important basic things: electricity, security, trains, the value of the currency. On all of these details, they're just doing a horrific job managing their country.
Yes.
No, yeah, it's all gotten a lot worse, and it really says something in talking with people who live in South Africa that they've got to turn. I mean, we even saw it with a Serpent Today video regarding what's going on in South Africa. People are having to turn their homes into fortresses. And they've even got to gate off and fence off the foyer, the main entry point of their homes. Make sure that, they've got iron and steel bars, making themselves prisoners in their own homes. Lest thieves and robbers get in and murder everyone and steal all the shit. And they've got to have barbed wire lining all around tall stone walls made of reinforced concrete. Homes have to be transformed into fortresses in order for people to just feel some semblance of safety there. Otherwise, it's an open invitation for people to be tortured and murdered and be robbed of all their worldly possessions.
And it's declined periodically, and not only that, the impact that it has on nations around there that was reliant at one stage upon the largest economic power. It slipped behind countries such as Ghana and Nigeria, which are growing because they're freer.
Exactly, and they say that on every metric, South Africa has gone backward. Education, health, employment, everything seems to be going downhill. And they are saying that the ANC party had the support of the majority of South Africans for almost 30 years, but last May, I think, the support has dwindled. It has become lower than 50, and there is a kind of lack of governance. And this has led the ANC party to...
They can't form a coalition government. The ANC has lost their historical mandate because they've let the entire country go to shit. Because they're hell-bent on anti-white racism and using that as a cudgel to scapegoat for why everything's shit in South Africa. Considering the farmers produce 92% of the food, once they leave, that whole area is screwed, as well as the wider part of that continent. Yeah, I think Razorwind probably said it best. If you can't figure out how to grow your own food, you need a certain subset of the population to do it for you, and that you treat that subset like shit to the point where they leave, and you can't figure out how to grow your own food, yeah, you kind of deserve to starve at that point.
to try to sort of pick a segment of the population and blame everything on that segment of the population. And there are several parties, especially we are going to talk also about the EFF, led by Julius Malema, who are openly calling and chanting, "Kill the Boer, kill the white man," which are things that shouldn't be, we shouldn't turn a blind eye to them. We should
we can't
constantly talk about them, because they are essentially pro-genocide rhetoric. Yep. That's how it works.
Are they the two main parties at the moment, or are there used to be a few more than them, if I remember rightly, but they've now risen to effectively be the two main political parties opposing each other? Because one was supposed to be a splinter group of the other, wasn't it?
So the EFF is a splinter of the ANC, and then there
are
two other major parties representing.
They're still major.
Parliament. Well, they can never beat the ANC, and they can never beat the ANC and the EFF together.
Yeah.
And what the EFF does is that it's
yes, because they've got a lock on the African vote there. They have a lock on the sort of tribalistic sensibilities of the African vote there. Remember what happened to the kulaks in the Soviet Union? Mm-hmm.
Sets out a far more extreme position that the ANC then must meet. Remember, you don't have to win politically, you don't have to win the election.
No.
You just have to make the ruling party implement your agenda.
Yeah.
It's like coalitions and coalition governments, like now with the CDU, CSU in Germany, and the SPD. Somehow the SPD is on the government yet again.
Yes, somehow.
Right, so a few months ago, Cyril Ramaphosa, the leader of the...
Because God forbid they should ever let AFD into a coalition government. Because, yes, a right-wing party being led by a female as the lead minister, who I believe she is a lesbian, somehow AFD still remains a threat to democracy. And some sort of existential threat that will bring about a rebirth of the Austrian Painter Party in Germany, when nothing could be further from the truth. These people are so pathetic in their desperation.
The ANC signed a very controversial bill, the land seizure law, which calls for expropriation of land without compensation, which effectively means there are no property rights, and if there are no property rights, people's lives become incredibly more precarious. Imagine being in a country where you are the minority and you suddenly have the government being able to come and tell you, I can confiscate everything you have, good luck.
Well, that sounds like they did it next door in Zimbabwe. They did exactly the same. So they're copying from that.
Yes.
We know exactly how that turned out. Zimbabwe is a failed state. A far cry from what they had going on with Rhodesia. Rhodesia was at least a functioning state. Things were not perfect under apartheid South Africa, but damn sight better than what's going on now. I would say now that South Africa qualifies as a failed state, or at least it's in the process of becoming a failed state. Threat to democracy has now just been turned into they're gaining momentum. We need to stop them before they try to fix the problems. Yeah, even if that includes, like in Romania, cancelling elections and overturning the will of the people expressed at the ballot box. Overturning election results. And jailing the winner.
It's not exactly unheard of. It's not a theoretical possibility. It's a very live possibility. So Donald Trump took issue with it, and he made a post in Truth Social saying, South Africa is confiscating land and treating certain classes of people very badly. This is a bad situation that the radical left media doesn't want to so much as mention. A massive human rights violation at the minimum is happening for all to see. The United States won't stand for it. We will act. Also, I will be cutting off all future funding to South Africa until a full investigation of this situation has been completed. And in reaction to Trump, Cyril Ramaphosa here talks about approaching Iran and Russia for a nuclear deal.
Yeah, good fucking luck with that.
Do you have a comment about the wider geopolitical angle of the conversation?
Yeah, so I think about it this way. With what's happening in the Red Sea and with the United States unable...
I think that is rather humorous, given that Russia was the first to make overtures to resettling the Boer farmers. They made the offer first before the Americans did. It just so happens that the Americans' offer was accepted.
To get the Red Sea shipping lanes open again without a deal with the Houthi, it becomes even more important to make sure that the Cape of Good Hope route is available and is open. And now with the ANC saying that they're going to draw closer to Iran and Russia, and they're already extremely close to China, it becomes a problem to lose this prime geopolitical real estate.
Going to be funny watching Russia and China fighting over Africa over minerals. I mean, in so many ways they already are. Chinese have already had quite the foothold
and so,
in Africa. And we've seen how well that turns out. All of these infrastructure projects that they've made as investments into Africa, the Chinese have acted like absolute loan sharks, where they set them up with such onerous terms that it was almost a fait accompli that they were going to seize these infrastructure projects, these ports, and these shipyards and everything else for themselves. And oh, by the way, showing that these African countries, they don't know how to negotiate a good deal, China brings in all their own labor. These are Chinese projects built with Chinese labor. Not once did they ever hire a single African national to do anything with these projects. So, if the past has been any indicator, congratulations, South Africa, you displayed yourself. Well done. With what happened in India, they'll be bringing in their own troops as well. Yep.
If there's a situation where there's talk of Cape independence or something of that sort, you can argue very convincingly that the strategic interests of the West require it to defend an independent Cape and to support an independent Cape against essentially China, Russia, and Iran. Now, with Russia, you might get a reconciliation, but...
Don't you see this as... this is the kind of consequence of us starting to try and mess geopolitically with what is perceived now as the two largest enemies, Russia and China. Russia is simply the gateway to China. As one security services in the UK mentioned it to me, it says, Stephen, we've always disliked Russia. England has disliked Russia since the 1600s.
Yes.
But we never really saw them as a major threat. What they are is a threat if they're a friend to China.
Exactly.
So by weakening Russia, we can then prepare our legitimate pre-war scenarios against China. But China have been aware of this for a long time. They were aware of it financially in the markets. They're aware about it economically, the way they've expanded outwards. So when you get dictators like this who are ready to butcher white people over land and use excuses, all we're doing is giving these people an opportunity to fall into the arms of those, because we're making it explicit at the now. And someone over the weekend who's living in northern Pakistan said it's China are using their weapons through the Pakistani military to test them out against French military airplanes.
Yes.
So that we can see this, and they're becoming a friend in that region. So we're now dividing the world into this potential.
Not just that, the bigger danger is this.
French planes and other weapons supplied to India. We should point that out.
The more pressure is placed on unnatural allies of China, like Russia and Iran, who are stuck with China rather than
Absolutely.
with China,
the
stronger the Chinese become.
Yes.
So if you want to be clever about it, create distance between Russia and China.
Yeah.
And you can't make both of an enemy at the same time.
No, you can't. You can't. Sorry.
Let us continue. So here we have Julius Malema openly calling for the killing of the boer, killing of the farmer.
Shoot to kill.
It's not the AC/DC song. He's literally talking about killing boers and farmers. Now, to my mind, this is just incitement to violence. This is the rhetoric that accompanies the demonization of white people, and whenever groups are...
I would say that the CIA just needs to take out this bloke, but that would probably make him into a martyr, and we don't want that. Export planes are usually inferior versions of the domestic ones. Usually, yeah. They're not going to give you the best stuff and give that away.
Demonized by rhetoric. That rhetoric also is seen as justifying doing... They are... the violation of their rights, so they should be taken seriously. We have here a thread by Visegrad for Julius Malema. If you want to check out, it's really interesting. And here we need to say also that really interesting.
Back up a bit.
And if you want to check out, it's really.
Oh, this is from Visegrad 24. Oh, it's a good account on Twitter, worth following. Julius Malema. Corrupt, racist, bloodthirsty hypocrite. Not a freedom fighter, he's a thug in a suit. Main goal is to burn South Africa to the ground whilst enriching himself. How typical. CIA already has the hands full, but empty, depending on how you look at it, because the current administration's firing people and cleaning house for the CIA. It's about time, too.
Really interesting. And here... we need to say also that there are more, even more.
Pity we can't seem to do the same with MI6.
Race laws right now than there were during the apartheid times. We have here from the
30 years into a non-racial democracy and they've got race laws.
Definitely check it out. And these laws now are mostly anti-white. They're anti-white, not mostly.
Of course,
so it looks like the left is trying to create a narrative according to which every criticism of South Africa constitutes far-right extremism and racism. Whereas in fact it looks like the regime that is governing South Africa is even more racist.
Yeah.
Right, so what happened? Now we're fast forwarding to today. So we have here...
the left goes into overtime to try and gaslight and convince people that there is no such thing as anti-white racism. When, if the most recent case with Carmelo Anthony is any sort of indicator, there is such a thing as anti-white racism. And that was on very apparent display with Carmelo Anthony, where a young man, a black man, stabs and kills a white student over a seat at a football game, and then is able to raise over $500,000, get himself a fancy new car, get him a new house for his mum, and just live the high life as he awaits trial.
Here, the first white South Africans boarding the plane for US under the Trump refugee plan. This is an article by Reuters today, which you can tell that the person who wrote it isn't particularly happy about it. And they're saying here that Trump's offer of asylum to white South Africans, especially Afrikaners, the group with the longest history among white settlers in South Africa, has been divisive in both countries. In the US, it comes
According
as
to
the
who?
Trump administration has blocked mostly non-white refugee admissions from the rest of the world. In South Africa, it
I mean, let's just face it, they're not going to vote for him or the Republican Party anyway, so why should he let in people who don't serve his interests? It's classic politics. You reward your friends and you punish your enemies. In defeat, malice. In victory, revenge. That is how politics works. I see a way it's conviction, you mean, because trust me when I tell you, with all the evidence gathered, he's cooked. I don't know that I trust the DA's office there in the county that happened to finish the job. I don't know that I trust the court system to do the cooking. I don't know that I trust the ability to put together a jury of 12 people to deliver unanimously a guilty verdict.
coincides with heightened racial tensions over land and jobs that have dogged domestic politics since the end of white minority rule. And as they say here, the granting of refugee status to white South Africans, who have remained by far the most privileged race since apartheid ended 30 years ago, has been met with a mixture of alarm and ridicule by South African authorities who say the Trump administration has waded into a domestic political issue it does not understand.
So why are they not, in this particular case, looking at the definition of the UN Refugee Convention and assessing that people are asylum applicants if they fear terror and abuse politically and materially on their side of things because they're white, and which we clearly see. If someone says kill the Boer, they are the Boer. That's a particular individual case that's saying about an individual group. We know that there's been a rise in violence in South Africa against white people. We know that people have been killed. We've seen that on there. So that is a legitimate class of individuals. Whereas those within this article that they're talking about, the non-white refugee admissions, particularly the 200 to 350,000 a month that are going up there through Biden, were economic migrants, of which Indians participated as the, I mean, this is from India, were the third largest group of people going through that southern border. They're all economic migrants. They're not fleeing terror in the same way.
Yeah, they're all coming over to get on the gravy train. They're all coming over here to work substandard jobs, substandard wages, and take those jobs away from hard-working native-born American citizens. True, but I do be an optimist. Plus, I think given the recent arrest of judges doing stupid things because of ideology, I'm willing to hold out hope. You have a bit more optimism than I do, Action. And in some ways, I commend you for it. I wish I could be that optimistic. Unfortunately, I'm just... If the past 10 plus years have been any indicator, I'm going to leave my expectations set lower. But that's just me. If I'm wrong, I'll be pleasantly surprised. If not, well, what are the same?
In the minds of the Reuters author, if you are European, you are by definition privileged.
Yes.
And this racial
Except-
hierarchy that they
Except you're not. You're not really. You're actually one of the most oppressed groups in the world, because you're the ones that are looked upon with suspicion. You're the one who are looked upon as the evil ones by default. You're the ones that get called racist, sexist, bigoted, homophobic, misogynistic. You're the one that gets accused of hate crimes and non-hate incidents. You're the one that gets denied certain benefits while people from other groups get those benefits that you'll never get. You're the one that gets denied special treatments while other groups will get that special treatment. You're the one that gets sent to the back of the line or not even considered for jobs, while everyone else gets considered because of DEI initiatives and because of equal opportunity laws. All of this talk of privilege, it's a lie. It's gaslighting by the powers that be. Like what my dad says, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. I mean, that's all you can do in the end. Letting countries fall apart because they didn't want to be called mean names. Can't imagine a dumber way to run countries. And yet it's so powerful and it's proven so effective for so many people for so long. But more and more people, I think, are finally waking up and saying, you know what? Call me a racist. I want things to fucking work again. I want my country back.
created is deeply symptomatic of the way that wokes invent a new holy victim for themselves. Because they miss Christianity, they insist on creating new holy victims. And for them, they've decided that rather than the holy victim being Christ, it must be the so-called oppressed. Now, in the case of South Africa, you constantly see attacks by South Africans against Zimbabweans or against other foreigners in South Africa.
Absolutely.
And you see them obviously against whites, but that doesn't fit their religious dogma. And so they can't see it and they can't recognize it. And they must insist, therefore, that this isn't a legitimate claim of asylum. It's built in. And then there's something else that must be said, which is it's totally fair to expect migrants and refugees to be prioritized based on their ability to assimilate into the host country. Yes. There's nothing wrong with saying that. It's perfectly normal. But to their minds, no, that's a violation of their religious beliefs.
The point is that I think that I phrase it in terms of ideology, and I think the core of the ideology of these people is that there can be no such thing as a white person who is a victim of racism.
Yes.
These are the people who have been educated in, the Ivy League universities that have been pushing, not just the Ivy Leagues, but they have been educated in the universities who have been pushing the critical race theory stuff, which demonizes white people. It's not the colorblind 90s.
No, if they really were to truly look at a philosophical and intellectual argument, they would be looking at the poor white South Africans who were living in the estates, the working class, the poverty class,
yes,
that got worse after the change and the increase of the ANC in power. They've been isolated, and they're the ones who should really be clearly looking for a way out through asylum into the US. But they'd equally be looking at the poor across the rest of Europe who are white. white or whatever colour. They're the ones who are suffering. Look at their historical context. People like my grandfather, who was a crofter, had to wheel things across Manchester, collecting things and trying to sell it to make a living. Before that, his parents were working in the factories. What white privilege do they have? But they don't fit the criteria. The white privilege they're looking at are the whites who were in power in Western Europe at the time, with the billionaires of the day, the millionaires of the day. So the critique is against them, but blaming everybody in society because they happen to be slightly better off than the Guatemalan poverty person.
And also completely absolving the rulers of South Africa of any responsibility
yes.
for the mess that they're in.
Yes.
As in, why is South Africa in a much worse economic state today than it was at the time that apartheid ended? Well, it's still the white people's fault.
Yes.
But what about the ANC? Does it take any responsibility for the corruption, for the mismanagement, for the economic
Of
policy,
course
for
not.
the socialism, for the explosion in welfare? Absolutely not. Why? Because it's
Why?
Because then they might actually have to do something and stop fucking things up.
Why was communism there still killing 20-odd million people? It wasn't the fault of poor old Stalin. He was such a lovely man. He just really had to suffer from the Tsars before, all those hundreds of years in which he didn't have the opportunity to rectify the impoverishment in this country, so he had to kill them.
Yep.
This is really integral to wokeness, because wokeness separates the population to oppressed and oppressors, and whoever is named an oppressed can do no wrong. So they have been targeted as oppressors. Anything that they do is wrong, and no one should speak about them because they can't be victims. And if anyone insists that they can be victims of racism, but also of bad policies, that's a far-right conspiracy, as far as the left is concerned, which is ridiculous. So South Africa here criticized the US as trying to interfere with its constitutional democracy. And they are talking about this move as being a political motivated. I think that this is just ridiculous.
No, and besides, the neoliberals and the neoconservatives, they opened the door to this sort of behavior a long time ago. So the genie's out of the bottle on that one. You can't all of a sudden say, oh, you're interfering with our democracy. No. You made it quite clear that if other countries do something we don't like, America and the neoliberal world order can interfere in a supposedly democratic country's daily operations for whatever reason, or even for no reason at all. There's zero accountability taken, yet they'll blame everyone else. Because it's so much more convenient to just do that. No, it's not about doing what's right, it's about what's convenient. Those two are often mutually exclusive.
Trump responded by describing Afrikaners as victims of racial discrimination, and that, as you can guess, violates the tenets of the woke ideology.
Doesn't the South African Constitution say that racist laws are illegal unless they serve the cause of racial justice?
Yes.
Something ridiculous, some kind of ridiculous.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Actually, no, that's something interesting.
And what is racial justice? Whatever those in power say it is. Therefore, they can put whatever racist laws in effect that they like. Especially if it means vengeance against the white man. Because remember, chat, what I said earlier. In defeat, malice. In victory, revenge. That is how power politics work. Just a blank space with constant eraser markings. Whatever they say it is.
Interesting.
Yeah,
But that's how social justice is being weaponized in order to promote the special
racism
interest
is illegal
groups.
unless it's against the right people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
That, unless it's against the races I don't like, in which case racism is fine.
Fine, that's perfectly
And then we
okay.
And it's just
That's how the left.
Legal racism.
Legal
So-
racism.
Legal
Legal
racism.
racism.
Legalized,
And that's embedded in the
institutionalized
Constitution,
racism in
And
another
that's-
direction.
I'm going to have to
Yes.
look that like that.
And that
up.
constitution was praised by the UN and by all the expert classes
Right.
as being incredibly fair and so on. It's
Okay.
And I
Yeah,
want-
because they would never do that sort of thing in the opposite direction. They would never take in the opposite direction against the white farmers. No, perish the thought.
to show you some reactions, and I think they fit the pattern we're talking about perfectly. So here we have someone called Kim Hello next saying, Nelson Mandela extended the hand of reconciliation to white South Africans after we committed acts of inhumanity against black South Africans, and we have failed the humanity test. We have largely remained unrepentant and racist. I want to say that this is textbook ecophobia. Ecophobia is the hatred of one civilization. There's a great book by Benedict Beckel on
Yeah, Kim Heller is apparently a self-loathing white person, and this is their way of coping and seething. They're saying to the Afrikaners who have sought refugee status in America, good riddance, shame on you. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to feel great shame as they go and resettle in America and build a good life for themselves. I was just about to say perish the thought too, beat me to the punch. Great minds think alike.
it, who I have interviewed multiple times. This is really tied to wokeness in a way, because it shows how, and according to that theory, towards the end of some civilizations, basically every civilization, there is a tendency to identify with others, and constantly view their own people as bad and as guilty and as the worst thing ever. It is
it's in that
portrayed as a virtue. It is portrayed as a virtue within that theory to say bad things about you, but also
It is portrayed as a virtue to hate yourself and hate your people, which I have never understood. I have no concept of that. I do not hate my people. I don't hate myself. As a matter of fact, I rather like my people, and I like myself. Even though sometimes both I myself and my people can do things that are rather daft. But that's what happens when you love yourself and you love your people. You allow a certain measure of grace. Just as God shows us grace in forgiveness for our sins, so we too should allow grace for ourselves and for our people.
this is deeply hypocritical because it completely robs people of agency.
yeah.
We're looking at it, it's there. It's made very clear in the word we.
Yes.
We.
It's not just, it's we remain unrepentant and racist.
Yes.
So the framing here is a framing of original sin.
Absolutely.
The framing here is a framing of original sin, and that's the only way to make sense of it.
It's idolatry. And if you've read your scriptures, you would know that there's one thing that really pisses off God more than anything, and that is idolatry. But also it shows a long history of people rejecting God and going complete stark raving mad as a result.
Yeah.
It's essentially a Christian heresy where Christian charity is extended to extremes towards rivals and is denied to friends. And that's the essence of heresy, really.
We have here from Blue Sky someone called John Cryer saying Trump has been a racist for decades.
Oh, the actor, John Cryer, whom we know from 2.5 Men, and also from, I think it was in the DC television universe on the CW as Lex Luthor. Which is funny because I believe he played a young nephew of Lex Luthor in Superman 4.
decades. As he violently expels legal immigrants of color, he invites white refugees from South Africa. I think this is a...
Well, yeah, I mean, if... again, there's an oversimplification. If you're in the country illegally, then you're breaking law and you need to leave. If you're exploiting the system at the expense of the native population, then you need to leave. But also, there's the whole element of realpolitik. You reward your friends, you punish your enemies. He's inviting people that he knows he can make citizens and who will vote for him. Why would he bring in a bunch of people who are not going to vote for him anyway? It's also because of the fact the ones getting deported are criminals and those who came in illegally. Yes. Once again, I tell you, in defeat, malice. In victory, revenge.
a perfect response because they're using racism yet again. Why? Because Trump wants to grant refugee status to people who are victims of racism.
It's so funny. Imagine that, a country enforcing its laws. I know. What a concept.
His policies. Yeah, there's no other way about it.
I mean, I don't know who John Cryer is. I mean, certainly Peter Creel there. That line there, every white South African.
That's pretty sad that John Cryer has gone from fairly well-known actor to literal who.
Is racist. Every white Englishman is racist. Every racist is a Brexiteer. You heard that line run through the campaign. It's it's all of one colour. You can only be one. And if you happen to be like me, Peter Creel, a white person, I must flagellate myself by throwing this kind of, what are those irons that they have in Iran across my back to prosecute myself to their on my knees to them. It's a dream.
There's another one saying here, make no mistake, Trump is bringing those Afrikaners here to be violent extremists, just like how they were in South Africa.
Oh, yes, they're so violent, you know, tending to their farms and growing their crops and raising their cattle. So violent, yes.
Stay vigilant. I think this is just ridiculous.
So instead of the KKK, it's going to be the AAA.
It's incredible.
Here we have Dr. Alison Wills giving us yet another delusional take. White South Africans should not come to America. We don't need any more racist people. We're full to the brim.
To which Visegrad24 responding, you're the one being the racist. And she responds with the typical gaslighting and bullshit of black people cannot be racist. Oh, and then there's Kaguya's Top Gal chiming in. They'll give a PhD to anyone these days. They really will. A PhD does not carry the weight that it used to. They will literally give a PhD to anyone these days.
Don't need any more white people. Sorry. Open
black
brackets.
People, hold on. Go, if you go back to that one, she says black people cannot be racist.
Yes.
I think that comes to the essential religious element of it.
That's right.
The perversity is this. Original sin is ascribed to every single human being. We all carry the burden of original sin. In the woke heresy, some groups do and some groups don't. Mm-hmm. There are pure groups and there are dirty groups. And
that's why wokeness invariably results on a morally complacent two-tier system.
Yes.
And that's what it justifies. In this case, it is weaponized against white people.
In every case, pretty much. Yeah,
I'm sure.
Pretty much every case.
Yes.
Asians are seen as white adjacent and therefore equally
depends
guilty
on
of white supremacy.
Same with Jews. Anyone from Israel.
Same with Jews. Yeah.
Right. And here we have yet another one, Colin Robinson saying, I don't want any new white people from South Africa in my town. I'm racist.
Well,
racist.
Can't even spell, Colin.
Yeah,
You're not. If you're going to call yourself a racist, at least learn to spell the bloody word properly.
I think that's a...
Yeah, there you go. That's not even your image.
Maybe that's a trolling one.
Yeah.
Right, so definitely check out the interview Josh did with Ernst van Zyl about the fate of South Africa. And it's really important, and we will go back to the issue, because it looks like South Africa is close to the end point of what this ridiculous critical race theory is doing in the West. And we don't want to emulate this. We shouldn't
import this.
we shouldn't emulate this.
No.
If you would like to watch the full uncut version that is also uncensored, head on over to lotuseaters.com to find out more.
That's good content there. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. If you have any thoughts, questions, or ideas for future videos, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. You can also follow me on Twitter @LordRexworth for more updates and behind-the-scenes content. And if you want to support the channel, check out my Coffee or Throne pages. Links are in the description. Finally, be sure to visit lordrexworth.com and follow me across all platforms. That's lordrexworth.com. Until next time, I wish you all the best, and God bless.